I'm currently on my third attempt to watch Sons of Anarchy. I watched it as it initially aired, and I tried again when it first came to Netflix, but both times I faltered. During that Netflix binge, I could remember that I gave up on the show at some point, but I couldn't remember when nor why, and then it happened, and I stopped again. I'm Royston Charmaine, and this is the fine line between anti-hero and villain. Sons of Anarchy is an American crime drama that aired on FX between 2008 and 2014, and this video will contain major spoilers for the entire thing. The show revolves around the titular motorcycle club and their involvement in various organised crimes, as well as the members' personal dramas. The main protagonist of the piece is Jackson Teller, best known simply as Jax. Any protagonist that knowingly involves himself in the selling of guns and the muling of drugs would be hard to paint as wearing a white hat. At best, he would be an anti-hero, a man who does bad things for good reasons. Initially, that's what we're faced with in Jax. At the start of Season 1, he has never killed anybody in cold blood, only ever shot in self-defense. He takes actions that he feels are best for his club and his family, seeking to bring to life the vision his deceased father had for him. This is shown as being in stark contrast to his stepfather and club president, Clay Morrow. Where Jackson is considerate and moral, Clay is merciless and self-serving, making decisions behind the back of his brothers to serve his own ends and ego. Having Clay around to play the villain as well as the actual villains that serve as antagonists helps us to see Jackson in a positive light. He is a shade of grey in a black world. With this in mind, the show works as we root for Jax as being by far the lesser of the evils we are presented with. However, as the show goes on and as Jackson's personal demons begin to overtake him, he comes closer and closer to becoming the full-blown villain himself. By the show's 7th and final season, the writers intentionally push him over that line, allowing the viewer to want to see him meet his ultimate end. Unfortunately, for me at least, that moment comes a little earlier than the writers probably intended. The penultimate episode of Season 5 sees Wendy, the absentee mother of Jackson's firstborn son and recovering heroin addict, return and seek visitation rights for her only child. Jackson, with good reason, does not want for this to happen, and seeks to prevent her from gaining any kind of custody. His chosen method for achieving this goal is to visit Wendy under false pretenses and forcibly inject her with a speedball, a syringe filled with both heroin and cocaine, before threatening to tell all of the legal personnel in charge of her visitation hearing that she is still an addict and was rambling in a stupor about wanting to see her boy. During that second watch through, I suddenly remembered why I stopped watching the first time around. Killing when your life is under threat is one thing, but assaulting a recovering addict who simply wanted the right to see her son is quite another. He stepped over that line for me into full villainy. But the next episode begins and still expects me to root for him. No. I want you in jail or dead now, Jackson. That's as bad as anything any of the other characters have done. Well, maybe not. This is a pretty heavy, messed up show, but still. It's bad enough that I no longer want what is best for this man. During this third watch through, I intentionally pushed past it. I knew going in that this moment was coming and that I would feel as I do about it, but I managed to pivot my viewpoint into seeing him as the villain of the piece that he undoubtedly now is. But that isn't what the writers wanted me to do. Maybe they intended this moment to be the jumping off point for the heel turn that he does eventually make. If that's the case, they did too good of a job. He was a heel from this moment. As I mentioned before, it would be impossible for a show this violent to feature a protagonist who doesn't embrace his dark side. But, until this point and for another season or so beyond it, Jackson's violent acts always felt mostly justified. He was a man backed into a corner and fighting to stay alive and earn for his family. That allows the viewer to excuse the extremity of his evil deeds and still remain firmly behind him. But that is a thin line to walk. At this point in the video, I was going to point out another example from television where the anti-hero line is treaded more carefully and successfully, but I couldn't find one. Up to the end of Season 5, Sons of Anarchy did it just about as well as anyone in the history of television, at least that I've seen. Jackson Teller was more sympathetic than Walter White, more forgivable than Tony Soprano, more likeable than Don Draper. That's what makes it such a shame that they unintentionally pulled the trigger on his full turn to the dark side a season too early. As I write my own anti-hero centered story, I will take on board all the many positive examples that Sons sets, but I'll also attempt to learn the lesson it taught me in finding the fine line between anti-hero and villain. Thank you for watching this video I made where I ramble about a personal reaction to an old TV show. If you'd like to listen to more of my ramblings, there are many more on my channel. Follow me on Patreon for free update posts, and you can throw me a few quid as well if you like. I've been Royston Charmaine, and until next time, peace and love.